Hello, everyone. It's 9 p.m. in Hong Kong, 1 p.m. in London, and 9 a.m. right here in New York City. Welcome to this live global conversation about the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism. I'm honored to moderate this discussion brought to you by the University of Hong Kong. This is part of a series for all of us to learn lessons from what's happening in Hong Kong and the region. Last week, we spoke to Professor Gabriel Leung of HKU Med to learn all about the medical aspects of the crisis. Today, we're taking your questions about the economy in Asia, the US, and beyond. We have the perfect guest for this topic, Professor Richard Wong, who is the Provost of HKU, the highest academic officer. He's also chair of economics and the Philip Wong Kennedy Wong Professor in political economy. He received his PhD from the University of Chicago in 1981. He was visiting scholar at the University of Chicago and the Hoover Institution at Stanford. He's also served on numerous public bodies in Hong Kong about public housing, industry, and technology development, as well as higher education funding. His current research focuses on public housing, inequality, and intergenerational mobility, as well as the political economy in Hong Kong and regional economic development in China. Welcome, Professor.
Well, hello, Sree. Nice to be here.
Thank you for making time for this event. I have to ask you, how are you doing at this moment?
We're doing fine. The campus is a little bit empty, except that students are studying in the learning commons and the library, and they're still living in the halls. The virus situation is firing up. The second wave has hit us, but in Hong Kong, everyone wears a face mask, and I think that protects themselves and protects others.
Yeah,
so
and
we're
that's
doing
one of the
okay.
changes. That's one of the differences between what's happening in Hong Kong and Asia and in the US. In the US, most of the medical directives are for everyday people who are not sick to not wear masks. And you will be wearing a mask before and after this, right? So that's the difference.
Yeah, we have been wearing masks for 2 months now.
Yeah, and it's also a difference in the culture of what people are deciding is the right way to go. And it tells us we really don't know. We're both in cities that are greatly affected, and we will talk about that. Folks, we're taking your questions from around the world via the hashtag HKU COVID-19. HKU COVID-19. Please tweet us. Please use that. And also by email, fightcovid19@hku.hk. Fightcovid19@hku.hk. And also follow us at HK University for the Hong Kong University Twitter handle, and I'm at Sree on Twitter, SREE. Let's get right to the questions, Professor. It's been an intense week in Hong Kong and the world. Beginning today, foreign visitors and even transit passengers are barred from entering Hong Kong in any capacity. Can you tell us what's happening and what's the latest?
Well, we are experiencing a second wave of the virus. The first wave came at the end of January and early February. And for almost 8 weeks, we only had a little bit over 100 cases of confirmed infection. But in the past week, the numbers have escalated beyond 400. And that's primarily because a lot of people Hong Kong residents are returning to Hong Kong. Travelers are coming into Hong Kong. They seem to have brought disease back to Hong Kong because the episode is now worldwide.
Yeah,
and that's why we are shutting our borders in terms of allowing only local permanent residents to return.
And that will, of course, have an impact on the economy. And we'll talk about that in just a second. Folks, if you're watching live right now, please hit share on the various platforms so that your friends and family from around the world can participate. You can also tag specific people. And if you comment in the stream you're watching, we will be able to come take your question or comment and post it and show it to the world. We're live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. So please make sure you are sharing this as widely as you can. So let's talk about the economy a little bit. What is happening with the economy so far, and then what will happen in Hong Kong now that these new rules are in place? The news of a second wave is quite scary for those of us who are still in the first wave.
Mhm. Well, we do not know exactly how it will develop. We hope that the second wave will be stopped or at least slowed down significantly, so that we wouldn't have a massive community outbreak, which will overwhelm our healthcare systems. Because we've been going through this for more than 2 months now, the economy is doing pretty slowly. This comes at a time when we had a major self-quarantine, social distancing. This has hit retail very badly. Travelers are not coming in, so our export of tourist services has really come down. So retail, dining, travel, business, all this has hit. Small enterprises are facing a pretty tough time. Many people are now not unemployed, but they've been asked to go home without pay. So the economic situation is likely to look pretty bad this year in Hong Kong.
Thank you. I want to just read some of the comments that are coming in on Facebook. Gary's watching in Pennsylvania. He's hunkered down there. Twyla in New York says, thank you for this. Second wave in Hong Kong is news to me. So that just tells you, given all the headlines, that people aren't able to keep up with what's going on because so much is going on. And we also had we have several other comments coming in. People are sharing. So folks, please tag your friends. Please share what's happening right here. You can just share it, retweet it, or post your comments. Tell us where you are. Tell us how you're feeling right at this moment as you're thinking about the crisis around the world. Tim says CDC and New York, they're both worried that people are leaving the city because New York City has become an epicenter. And I know, Professor Wong, that you love New York. You were here just last March. You know so much about America. You've lived in America. When you're hearing this news, how do you feel about how America is reacting to all of this?
Well, I think it's really a pity. It's a rich country, world-class healthcare system, but I think the response has been slow, and this is a very contagious disease. So before you know it, it's escalating, and this is pretty scary. I think I feel very sad for what's happening to many of the friends I know in the United States. I think they're very, very anxious.
Yeah, thank you. We have a question from Gary who says, what kind of COVID diagnostic kits are you using in Hong Kong? How are people doing that? Because that's a big worry here. The testing is a big question here.
Well, there are a variety of kits. I think a lot more is coming out. And I'm not the technical person to give you advice on this. You could go back to my colleague Gabriel Leung, who's much more expert on this. But a variety of kits are being developed. Some can give you a turnaround time that is only a couple of hours, and I think that's pretty good. I think we should develop these test kits very massively, and then streamline and triage people. The greatest danger in this virus situation is cross-spreading, not only in the community but also in the hospital.
We in the US have been rushing to move teaching online in the last 2 weeks. What is the situation with online learning, and is there anything we can learn from you that would be helpful, not just in the US, but countries like India? You may have seen the news that we are now, the folks in India are 21 days under lockdown. And I'm thinking of my parents who are living there and so many friends and family, as I'm sure we have also lots of folks in Hong Kong with deep connections to India.
Well, the University of Hong Kong does not rely on online education in its normal course of activity. So we had a steep climb in terms of moving into online education. Basically, after Chinese New Year, which is end of January, we realized that it was no longer possible to go forward with face-to-face. So beginning on February, we basically moved to completely online education. We've been trying to, because Hong Kong wears face masks, so the spread wasn't so severe. So we're able to get our final year students to come back to campus, a small number of them, to finish essential laboratory work so we can get final year students to graduate on time without compromising on the full range of learning experiences. But aside from laboratories and studio work, it's all online. And many of our faculties are really putting in a lot of effort to learn quickly, to master new skills that they don't have. And so far, student feedback, which we have, is lectures are doing very well. And they find it much better than actually being in the classroom. But interaction tutorial is not as robust as we hope to get it. We probably need to fine tune to improve our skills in that area.
Thank you, Professor. One of the things that I think all academic institutions have to think about is, what will this all look like afterwards? You know, when students are now working from home, how will they react to being back in the classroom? A lot of them will like it, but as you said, a lot of them may miss some of the online elements as well. And this is about thinking about the future of education. So let's ask you a question about small businesses. There's a lot of worry about how many will be wiped out in certain countries where this is happening.
I think this is a time when government intervention to keep small business afloat, which have been particularly hit. Government public expenditure has been increased by 20%. Our normal government spending is 20% of GDP. So we basically spend another 4 to 5% of GDP trying to give everyone in Hong Kong who's an adult $1,300 just for spending to prop up some consumption, but consumption is not going to come back until you are able to hold the virus, to stop the virus. Because as long as the disease is around, people don't go out, they don't spend. So this is basically emergency cash. In terms of companies and small business, government is basically providing $250,000 of emergency low interest loans to small businesses to keep their businesses from collapsing. Many workers in the retail sector are not working, but they are not fired. They still keep their jobs, but they're not working.
Thank you, Professor. We have a question from Minimi on Twitter. She says, the sterling plunged last week. What would you think of the future about the pound? And how would you think the COVID-19 will affect the ongoing Brexit, trade talks, and economic relations between the EU and the UK?
Well, I think as soon as we are able to check the outbreak and to slow down and eventually prevent the disease from escalating and accelerating, then the economy will begin to come back. That's when people can go back to work, when businesses can restart. I think after that, I'm not worried about the pound not coming back. Now, but then the whole world is is now going into recession. So it will take some time before we get out of this. As for Brexit, I think negotiations are in terms of getting an arrangement. Nobody is focusing on that until we get the virus situation come under control. We will not be worried about these matters. That everything is just going to be. It's like a freezing of a video.
Thank you, Professor. If you're just joining us, you're in the middle of a wonderful, important discussion with Professor Richard Wong, who is the provost, or the highest academic officer at the University of Hong Kong, and he's an expert economist, and he's sharing his thoughts and taking your questions and comments about what is happening around the world as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. Please use the hashtag HKU COVID-19 so that we can see your questions. And please comment right now live on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or LinkedIn. We're on all those platforms. And we also want to share some of the comments that have been coming in. So we're just going to pull them up. We have people all over the world watching, and we're just so grateful for everyone listening to us and participating right now. So we're going to call up some of the comments that have come in, including people watching all over the United States and in other countries. We have a question from Laura Silverman from Philadelphia. If you're ready, Professor, she says, how do we stay safe at home with others? I've heard people are attempting to disinfect mail and grocery bags with spray, immediately washing clothes when they come in from the outside. What are the top things to do? Again, you're not the medical expert, but you have lived through wave 1 and now wave 2. So we are in America looking for all guidance. Thank you, Professor.
Well, I think if you go out and shopping, you bring things back, doing some disinfecting is probably laudable. But the most important thing is really to frequently wash your hands, avoid touching your face, your eyes, and your nose. This is where the virus get into your system. So this is the key thing. Just keep your hands away from your face and frequently wash your hands. Washing your hands with soap kills the virus. It's a very effective wash for 20 seconds until it's foamy. That's the key. Now, it will be much better if you have a mask when you are close to people. Right? If you maintain safe distances, the chance of spread is reduced significantly. So that's why we talk about social distancing, avoiding big crowds. If you stay at home, you probably don't have big crowds. And if anyone goes out, come back, sanitize yourself, particularly your hands.
Thank you. And I don't think you would have ever predicted, Professor, as a professor of economics, you'd be giving hand washing advice to people around the world. That shows you what an unusual time we're in now. We have a question that is right up your academic field, a question from Alfred, who's a Master of Social Work graduate. He asks, with a commitment to nearly unlimited lending made by central banks, the cost of capital for so small and medium enterprises is very low. Do you think this monetary policy can really benefit them?
Well, first of all, the reason why you have to the Fed has to make a commitment to all this is basically there's a liquidity crunch in the financial system, particularly in the rich countries, and that is because we are in a global economy and there's a massive rush for American dollars, and if you don't supply it, then the cost of capital will rise. This prevents caving in of small enterprises and a variety of other enterprises. But to get the economy back on feet, you have to stop the virus, stop the disease. Until that is accomplished, people will not be able to go back to work. The economy will not pick up. Transportation is not going to work, and stores are not going to open. So the key to saving the economy is to stop the virus. Flooding the system with liquidity is to prevent sudden death.
Thank you. That is helpful. Now I'm going to ask you a question that I know a lot of people are thinking about. What is your advice for President Donald Trump of the United States?
Well, I think my advice for every president or prime minister in the world is, mobilize all your resources, all the public resources and personnel you have to spread the message that people should keep safe distances until the disease is under control. That you must tackle the disease because you cannot jumpstart the economy without the disease being halted. And this needs to be done on a worldwide basis because it's no longer a disease that hits only one part of the world. It is everywhere and will keep on spreading despite all the efforts to close down borders. It will only slow it down, but everyone must practice self-isolation and social distancing.
Thank you, Professor. And folks, if you're watching right now, please hit share in the platform you're in because we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we are on YouTube and LinkedIn. Please post your comments and we will read them as well as come to you with the questions. We'll ask Professor Wong the questions that you're asking. We have a comment here. David says, Professor Wong, student from before, he would like to ask, how would the evolving coronavirus situation affect the interaction between the US and China in the economic as well as political outcomes of the trade war? And how would the power balance change between democratic and authoritarian regimes?
Wow, that's an interesting question. It's let's take it, in bits and pieces. I think when the world is faced with a global virus outbreak, it's absolutely important that major countries begin to cooperate. First, they must cooperate by fighting the disease in a coordinated manner, share medical resources and expertise. I think that the animosity must abate in order to fight the disease. The next thing is it will help the world economy if trade wars is abated at this time, at least no further escalation. And I think that is very important because the lessons of the Great Depression in 1929 is that when a major economic crisis emerges, it is important for countries to cooperate. If they do not cooperate, then it will worsen the economic situation when a recession is pushed into a Great Depression. Now, so global cooperation in public health matters, as well as in coordinating economic stimulation policies and monetary and financial policies are very important at this time to both check the virus and to avoid a further worsening of what is already a global recessionary situation. Now, how would the balance tip? Why would we care at this point? I think I thought a famous economist say, if you don't have, in the long run, we're all dead. So I think we should seize the immediate, deal with the next few months virus problem, and avoid exacerbating economic warfare.
Thank you, Professor. Folks, if you're watching right now, we have another 30 minutes with Professor Richard Wong. We're taking your questions on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn. Please join us and please ask your questions. I'm just going to read, Professor, some of the questions and comments that have come in from LinkedIn, just so you know and you see how global this conversation is. Carol's watching from Tampa Bay. Theta's watching from Jersey City. Victoria from Miami Beach. Gail is watching from New York. We also have our friends watching from the south of France, and so many questions and comments coming in. Deborah says, in addition to small business, how is Hong Kong helping the self-employed?
I think depending on which sector you are in terms of self-employed, not all parts of the economy is suffering. As an international financial center, which has moved onto cyberspace a long time ago, is fundamentally unaffected. Banks are, of course, affected because economic activity, real economic activity is slowing down. In terms of the self-employed, if you're self-employed in the IT sector, things are not doing badly at all. There's a huge demand for online services or services that can be delivered through some online platform. However, if in Hong Kong, if you're a taxi driver, most of them are self-employed. If you were in all these personal services, most of them are self-employed. Well, the economy is already in recession. Last year, we had a minus 1.2% growth rate. This year, it is going to look a lot worse. So I think self-employment for personal services, a variety of service sector, is not doing well. Now, that's why Hong Kong government has been handing out cash, $1,300 US per person, per adult, to all residents. This is to tide them over through a difficult period of time. Fundamentally, Hong Kong's economy is totally link up with the world. It cannot re-jump itself without the whole world recovering.
Yeah, let's just a question that came in from Joanne Chan. She says, how should a lower price ceiling be implemented, considering that many people are unable to buy enough masks at a low price? Are there any other measures adopted or should be adopted by the Hong Kong government? And then we're going to go really big. We're going to ask a question about Boeing.
If you think of it the other way, I don't think if to set a price ceiling on masks is not the solution. In fact, if you mask prices have increased by 5 times to 10 times during the past 2 months. But what is fascinating is that the market works. When you pay higher prices, you can find masks. Masks are available on sale in many stores, in numerous stores now. At the beginning, there were long queues. Now you don't have queues. But prices are high. But prices are high everywhere in the world. Basically, there's a huge shortage of masks at the moment. 50% of the face masks that were produced in China. And China stopped exporting, and therefore there's a shortage. Now, getting enough face masks requires actually to let the free market mobilize the resources to make it work. I think it will come down. The prices will come down.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's talk about big corporations. We've talked about the self-employed. We've talked about businesses, medium-sized businesses, corporations. Boeing, as an example, are asking for bailouts from the U.S. government. Do you think government should provide bailouts to corporations in the current crisis? And what are the oversight requirements so that they don't just do stock buybacks and instead help workers and really help the economy?
Bailouts is a complicated question. I think the most important issue is how to protect as many smaller and medium-sized enterprises, because that's where the main core of economic activity lies in every economy, and where most of the people are employed. So I would certainly favor preference be given over to small, medium enterprises in terms of supporting a recovery of the economy. For the larger corporations, most of them actually are not in dire straits. Now, you mentioned specifically Boeing. Boeing was not doing well because they had produced a new plane that had flaws in it, and so they were already in a difficult economic situation before the coronavirus hit. Now, saving Boeing is a completely different matter. It may be a strategic national asset to save it, but then all airlines are in dire straits now.
Thank you. I'm just reading from some questions and comments that are on LinkedIn. Goran says hello from Croatia. He's a doctor in Croatia, is watching right now on LinkedIn. We have Mr. Reddy watching from India. And Amilda asks, the professor said the second wave was caused primarily by residents' returns or foreigners coming. Was it because they were not quarantined by the state? Are second waves possible otherwise? When is China expected to resume production? So
China is already trying to resume economic production. Now, the best estimates probably show that in the past 2 months, China's economic activity had declined by perhaps as much as 20% in the last 2 months. That's a very serious decline. Now they're trying to pick it up, but picking it up is the supply chains are beginning to move. But then, because the whole world is now going into a global economic recession, the buying power has also reduced. So recovery in China, also economic recovery in China, also depends on the whole world checking the virus spread. On the matter of the second wave, because Hong Kong is a small open city, we have done very well because people have been wearing face masks and self-protecting. However, as the disease began to spread to the whole world, Hong Kong has a very globalized population, people who live and work outside Hong Kong, students who study abroad, and because the virus situation worsened in North America, in Europe, then many of them returned to Hong Kong. Now they are residents. Some of them are travelers, but most of them are residents, and they've brought the disease back to Hong Kong. So that's why we're beginning to exercise that even for local residents. Anyone who come back, they have to go into quarantine for 14 days.
Thank you, Professor. Abby in Boston has a question about the stock market in Hong Kong as it reacted like in the US. And then we have a question also about the housing market and real estate market in Hong Kong. So if you can talk about both of those, please.
Okay. Well, the stock market has, as an international financial center, all markets are connected. So Hong Kong's markets has come down like elsewhere, but has come down less so because most of the stocks that are listed on our stock market are primarily Asian stocks and stocks whose primary economic activity has been in China. Now, China's virus situation has been pretty much abated at the moment. And as a result, the outlook is less uncertain compared to the economic outlook in North America and in Europe. And that's why in the past 2 weeks or so, the Hong Kong stock market has come down much less than, say, those in Europe and in North America. So now, in terms of property markets, Hong Kong's property markets have been very high to a large extent because of the shortage of housing stock and the slow rate of housing supply as well as commercial property. With the economic slowdown, it's unavoidable that the property market will decline. Economic activity is slowing down, so commercial rents, retail rents are all coming down. Property prices are coming down. But I think because of the continual shortage of the housing stock as well as the commercial real estate, I think the correction will be will not be like it was in, say, 20 years ago when the Asian financial crisis, when the property market corrected by more than 50%.
Thank you, Professor. I just want to show you Tuesday and Wednesday's Wall Street Journal headlines so we can discuss them. Tuesday, the headline was "Stock Slides as Lawmakers Tussle." You know that what was happening here. And this morning, as you know, it's morning in New York. It's nighttime in Hong Kong. This is the headline. Dow soars 11%, best day in 87 years. So what do you think? And will this last? What is going to happen? I know it's hard to predict, of course, but you know the U.S. stock market well. Please talk about that.
Well, it's a volatile. Volatility will probably be the characteristics of all stock markets going forward for quite a bit of time. I would not predict what will happen tomorrow or what will happen in the next week. I think fundamentally, once we get the virus situation spread under control, and then the economy will gradually recover. If governments are able to cooperate and we avoid aggravating the global trade tensions, then we will probably be able to recover much faster. I think it is learning the lessons of history in a global economic crisis, this time sparked by an outbreak of a highly contagious and infectious disease. It is all the more important for countries to cooperate in this area. If we don't, I think we'll be looking at a rather bleak economic prospect. It will have now if you go 3 years, 4 years, I'm pretty confident that we'll probably get a handle over the viral situation. We'll be able to manage the disease much better. I would think at that time, people will rethink the shape of globalization. Global supply chains will not disappear. Certain information and communication technology-driven economic activity will probably grow even more robust, but global supply chains might become more diversified. And this could actually be a good news for many developing countries that had missed out on the globalization driven by information and communications technology in the last 30 years. So not everything necessarily is bleak. I think global supply chains are here to stay, but they might be reconfigured. They'll give greater diversity to in terms of regional spread, and so not everything is bad news.
I understood. Folks who are watching right now, I'm learning a lot. I know you're learning a lot. So let's share this conversation on Facebook, on Twitter. Just hit share or tag specific friends or retweet. And please follow at HK University. And also we're using the hashtag HKU COVID19. Please ask your questions in the streams you're in right now if you're watching live. And of course, please retweet and please share. We are doing this series of conversations so that we can learn from our friends in Hong Kong and from the experts at Hong Kong University. We're getting so many questions and comments coming in, Professor, so we're going to speed it up a little bit if that's okay, so that we can really get everybody in. And we should also point out it's 9:40 p.m. in Hong Kong right now. You've already had a long day. You're doing so great. So thank you. Jennifer Chan asks, what do you think are the most resilient industries that'll come out of this global recession and market climate, and why? Thank you.
Well, I think the modern information communications technology sectors will certainly do well. I think this might be an opportunity for us to rethink our investment in healthcare. So that we probably should put a lot more effort into infectious disease treatment, the research into antibiotics, viral drugs, and I think public healthcare protection to mitigate such. You see, with a more globalized world, it opens up also the opportunity for diseases to spread. So I would think healthcare and information communications technology sectors are going to do well.
That's great to know. We have more questions coming in, and one of them is about China. It's begun to reopen and to restart the economy. Do you see a quick recovery, and what is your estimate of China in terms of growth going forward?
Well, I think they will recover, but I do not think it will be a recovery that will bring them back to their old trajectory, largely because we are still in a global recessionary environment. So we have to solve the global problem in order to solve also China's problem, which is a fairly open economy, is an important part of the global supply chain. The other thing is whether China can readjust its economy in a global recessionary environment towards more domestic consumption, so that it becomes more internal demand driven and less global demand driven. That means the recovery will also be at a rate that will be slower than what we have seen in its recent historical past, which is very much like 6 to 8% growth rates. If it's going to rely primarily on domestic driven consumption power, then I think its recovery will not be as robust as we've seen in the past.
Thank you. Amy Howe is watching from New York City. Gary says very sound advice from Professor Wong. Arlene is watching from New York. Can we just reflect for a minute? You know, we're talking so much about the news and everything. Talk about the relationship between Hong Kong and the United States, and reflect a little bit on your own time and friendships here in the US, please, Professor.
Things have been going so fast that we don't take the time to stop. we talk about the face mask thing. I noticed that on many universities, as a result of the outbreak, basically students are all going home and they are relying entirely on online education for learning. This creates a lot of stresses that in terms of an adjustment process. Here at the University of Hong Kong, we have moved on to that mode, but a lot of students are still on campus. And some of them have continued to stay in the dormitory. Dormitories are pretty full. And students are back in the libraries. They're studying. Although there are no classes, but they are studying. They can have access to all types of resources. And what I'm saying is there are different strategies to react to a crisis situation. And I think what has taught me is that as a university professor, we are very much bound by the kind of culture we are adjusted to. In Hong Kong, because we had a SARS outbreak 17 years ago, the population is, once we know an infectious disease coming, everyone puts on face masks, right? The market brings their masks at a highly escalated prices, but people would be willing to pay for it. And then there is still activity that can be maintained, right? And I think this is important. And I think as I look at back at the United States, I think there are many things that we can learn from each other in this crisis. I think the United States the universities have been able to respond very quickly, I think, in the face of a massive outbreak to get students to go back home. I think that's a really good, fast and immediate response. But if we were to go through this again, I think they could take a look at how we have in Hong Kong have been adapting to it in a somewhat different way. So with less draconian measures, if we take it early and we go on to a much more prepared, vigilant situation of keeping social distances.
Thank you, Professor. We have a question from Facebook. What, if any, will be the long-term consequences of quantitative easing? Do you expect inflation to spike as a result of the massive printing of money, or will it be offset by higher unemployment and a positive supply driven by lower oil prices? And this is a question that has come from Dar. Thank you very much, Dar. And please, folks, please keep posting your questions and please share and retweet the conversation happening right now with Professor Richard Wong, who's the provost, the highest academic officer at the University of Hong Kong.
Well, quantitative easing, first initiated by the U.S. Fed, has been ongoing for pretty much a whole decade. There were a lot of concern that it will ignite inflation in the early years, 2010, 2011, but that has not materialized. It remains a bit of an anomaly why quantitative easing did not increase inflation. Well, it doesn't for a variety of reasons, but fundamentally, there is no compelling evidence that quantitative easing will ignite inflation. It does result in massive asset price appreciation, but it did not seem to have stimulated a lot of rapid economic growth, although the record varies from country to country. So I'm not too worried about it reigniting inflation at all.
Okay, thank you. So this has been like a master class with Professor Wong, who's a great economist. And you don't have to just be satisfied with this conversation, and you don't have to be yet a student at the University of Hong Kong to benefit from his knowledge, because he has done a MOOC, a massive open online course. And Professor, with your permission, we're going to show a little trailer from that. And I will ask you, after we watch a little bit of it, I'll come in with, you can just narrate what it's like, why the course is important, etc. You can talk about that when I come to you in a minute. So here is the video.
This is the first of 4 courses in a sequence that applies economic analysis to the study of the state, the law, and the economy. We explore the rationale for having the state, the law, from an economic and the critical difference between democracies and autocracies as alternative political systems. We examine how state and legal institutions can affect economic development and how economic development can affect political change or political.
Professor, I want to take that class. Tell us about this and how did that come about? Anyone can sign up for it right now using going to edX, can find it. We'll also put the URL so that everyone can see it. But if you go to edX, you can search it up and just put in Professor Wong's name, Richard Wong, State Law and the Economy. So talk about this course, please.
Well, this is a course I've been giving at the university for 30 years, and the key of this course is basically to apply economic tools to help us understand how different political systems, different legal systems can impact economic development, can impact economic growth, and how decisions are made, and whether and even particularly under democracies and in contrast to autocracies. And within democracies, there is a liberal trend which tries to limit the size of government, to give more freedom to individuals to lead their own lives, versus populist democracies, which try to be appeasement of the crowds, vote gathering, and does not necessarily respect the freedoms and liberties of individuals. And we like to contrast these different types of political systems and how they affect economic as well as political decision making in different societies. So we do a comparative analysis of different countries in different periods of history.
100, 200 students, you're teaching it to thousands of students. Are you ready for that?
Well, yeah, I'll see how it happens. I look forward to getting a response from students who take my course. Sometimes their questions have been important in stimulating my thinking, and also how I continue to develop the contents of the course. And sometimes students ask very tough questions, and that get me thinking.
Yeah, no, thank you. And on the screen, we have the sign up for the MOOC, the Massive Open Online Course, State Law and the Economy. And people can go right onto the edX site and find it. Otherwise, please go to the very important Hong Kong U website all about fighting COVID-19, so that you can see previous sessions of this conversations that we've in the series, as well as you can learn from how to learn about all the different things that the university is doing. That's called fightcovid19.hku.hk. Very important. We only have a few minutes left, and Steve says the session with my guest has become an important part of the daily life. Talk a little bit, Professor, about the role of these. We talk about social distancing, but we're more connected than ever now. We're physically distant, but more connected. As you can see behind me, we've got the Hudson River. So I'm taking you to New York, and I'm now with you at the campus of Hong Kong University. Talk a little bit about that, please.
Well, I think what the virus situation has occurred is that as we begin to become more distant from each other physically, man being a social animal just craves to reach out, to be connected. And it's really great today that we have this information communications technology breakthrough that allow us to be connected in different ways, strangers as well as friends. You've never felt so close to people. And sometimes you watch video clips of people struggling at this time, and you really feel bad. The videos that come from Italy, from some of them are people who I've known in the past, and the stories they tell, they make me cry. And then on better days, we are connected to friends all over the world, and we share in their happiness and in their lives as they get, as well, at my age, as they have grandchildren. And I think that's a great thing to have happened. We could stay connected in ways that I could never have imagined when I was a student.
And we're talking today, just as the news of Prince Charles being diagnosed with the virus tells you that no one is immune from this. No one is safe. Any economic strata, no matter how famous or how successful, everybody can be exposed to this and can have health problems. We have a question from Priscilla Wong. She says, Professor Wong, how quickly do you think the Hong Kong economy, other Asian economies, and economies in the rest of the world can recover from this hit? I know it's hard to predict, so if you can walk us through, and I presume you have different scenarios, best case, worst case for different regions, correct?
Well, the best case scenario is that everyone becomes very vigilant to check the disease, that governments cooperate with each other to make the spread of the disease enemy number one. Then it is not impossible that by latter part of this year, the disease would slow down. We could go back to some normal economic life, and pretty much towards the end of this year, we may be able to see a turnaround. And that's the best case scenario. And then the recession would last, maybe 1 year, and then we'll be out of it. There are worst case scenarios that would involve governments not willing to be cooperative, governments not sufficiently vigilant in checking the disease in some parts of the world, or adopting not as effective policies in checking the disease. These will all slow down the recovery. That means it may take us beyond the current calendar year.
So that's worrisome for a lot of people as we listen to that. Thank you, Professor. We're just going to read some of these comments as there's so many people posting questions and comments, and we're just so grateful for everyone's attention. We want to remind you that we have a terrific website from the Hong Kong University HKU that you can find, fightcovid19.hku.hk, and you can also send in your questions to the website. You can also tweet at HK University. You can also please follow at HK University on Twitter. We are going to continue this series so that we can learn everything possible from Hong Kong and the region. Before we go, Professor, anything you'd like to share about Hong Kong University, the resilience of its students, the faculty that you would like to share with the world right now?
Well, actually, at Hong Kong University, I'm actually very amazed at the resilience of both the students, the staff, and the teachers. When the virus broke out, nobody was well prepared. Nobody knew exactly how it will turn out. It was incredible that people became very quickly unified, both in terms of the way they decided how we will tackle this. We went very quickly to go onto online education, to keep the campus on a low density population. Everybody practiced vigilance in terms of social distancing, self-hygiene, and making a lot of sacrifices in order to keep the university functioning. There were, and I think going through these few months and seeing how people have pitched in has been really one of the most moving and touching things that have happened in Hong Kong. And I'm really delighted to have the opportunity to be able to work with all my colleagues and students to share their challenge, their mood swings, and then their willingness to soldier on. I think that's a very comforting thought, and I hope people in other parts of the world that are still going through the most difficult part of the time to take confidence that that this will end if we put in enough effort and we coordinate and our efforts and for once think about a broader commitment to humanity and to the safety of all others.
Thank you. What a beautiful thought to end on. You have given me hope. You've given me knowledge, and we are so grateful. Our guest has been Professor Richard Wong, who is the Provost of the University of Hong Kong, the highest academic officer. He's also the Chair of Economics and the Philip Wong Kennedy Wong Professor in Political Economy. Thank you very much, Professor. We wish you and your colleagues the very best. This is a part of a series for all of us to learn from lessons of what's happening in Hong Kong and beyond. Last week, we spoke to Professor Gabriel Leung of HKU Med on the medical aspects. Today's conversation was all about the economic aspects, and we had a comment here. I'm just going to read a couple of these. Fiona Lee says, "Thank you, Professor. Looking forward to learning more from you." We had a comment saying, "Can we do part 2 of this chat?" Sunny says, "Can we do part 2? Probably not so late and not at this time with the professor, but if he's willing, we would love to have him back. Thank you so much," says Jason, and he shows a strong emoji because I think we all need to be strong, and you have given us great ideas on how to stay that. Lance says, "Thank you so much, Professor Wong, for doing this." Laura says, "Very helpful conversation, insights about many aspects of this shared experience. Wonderful to end on a hopeful note." So let us end there. Thank you all for watching. Please follow at HK University on Twitter. My name is Sree Sreenivasan. I'm a professor at Stony Brook School of Journalism. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to moderate the conversation. Please tweet at me at Sree, S-R-E-E. My email is sree@sree.net. Thank you very much, Professor, and we'll say goodbye, and we'll have you wait.
Thank you. And peace and safety in New York.
Thank you. You too.